Your house is worth whatever it's worth, right? Whoever sells it. Wrong. I'm Charlie. Welcome to Moving Home with Charlie, and thank you for coming.
Charlie Laundering grew up in Sussex, is the founder of Best Agent and presenter of Moving Home with Charlie.
If you want to find one of these guys, look out for those compassionate professionals. All estate agents are not the same.
So Charlie, what would be your advice for people interested in buying new builds right now?
Don't overpay. Do buy, but don't overpay. That's why I say disregard the guff. Read into the numbers and look, and it's buried. The bad news is buried in the small print, okay?
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Property Press Awards.
They may or may not be telling the truth, but you should form your own view. Get out and view, get out and view, get out and view. You cannot be in a position to make offers and have the offers accepted if you're not viewing. Just be out there viewing. Pay attention to the back of the class. If you've not been watching my videos, I did one just a couple of days ago. Disregard the guff, guys. Good evening, everybody. Welcome to another Moving Home with Charlie live stream. I'm Charlie Lambden. This evening, I'm very, very happy to welcome back the boss of the conveyancing firm, who are my partners. So when those of you fill out the form on the Moving Home with Charlie website for a conveyancing partner, this is the company that you'll be contacted by. His name is Simon David. He's from Thomas Legal. Just before I bring him in, we've got a couple of questions to ask. I'm going to kick off with the first question. We've got a couple of advanced questions to go through. Please ask your conveyancing related questions. They don't need to necessarily be technically legal questions, but also just about the importance of conveyancing in the overall process. Because when you need to move, conveyancing is above all else the most important part of the process. It's tough out there. Deal fall-throughs are increasing, generally speaking. I don't know if Simon's experiencing that. We'll ask him in a minute. But the whole purpose of this channel is to help people who need and want to move. So if you've got a question that's related to the legal side of moving home and the conveyancing side, that's what I want to hear from you tonight. So welcome everyone that's watching. And without further ado, let me bring in Simon. Good evening, Simon. How are you?
I'm very good, Charlie. Yeah, how are you?
Yeah, very well, thank you. And where are you talking to us from this evening, roughly?
I am in rainy Cheltenham.
Rainy Cheltenham, okay.
Home of National Hunt Racing, although I don't think there's much racing going on tonight.
Oh, right, okay, yeah. Just up the M5 from us. So it's actually been a few weeks since we've spoken. Yep. And I know that you and your team are talking to estate agents every single day as part of what they do. I talk to them in another context as well. And I think the first question everyone would love to hear the answer to is, you are absolutely on the front line, bleeding edge of property transactions. You are the people who actually transact. You're the guys who actually do the exchange of contracts, which is the actual transaction of it. So is there anything that you're seeing right now on the front line that would be of interest to people trying to move house now?
I think what we're saying is that in general terms, people that are transacting are very serious. We're not getting people sort of going into it, not really too concerned about it. So actually the fall through rate is relatively low. So there are serious buyers out there. We're seeing our transaction levels are lower. The agents are saying that although there are deals to be done, they are having to work a lot harder to get those deals done. So, in the last couple of years, they've been almost order taking, a couple of viewings and the house is sold. Now it could be 20, 30 viewings before the property is sold. And, so agents are working much harder. Clients are less enthused about the whole thing. So the sad thing is that this is taking longer. The transaction times are sort of getting longer and longer because buyers are sort of hedging their bets a bit, making sure there's nothing else on the market that might be a bit better, a bit cheaper. So there's more stock for people to look at. So we're good. I mean, we're doing well. Upper market's doing very, very well because less people affected by mortgages. Lucky people that can afford a couple of million quid's worth of property don't need a mortgage. Yeah. But in general terms, we're okay. Transactions are down. As I said, upper market's moving better than the lower market.
Okay. Okay. So we had one of the advanced questions that we got in was, if I buy a search pack up front, is there any reason why my solicitor cannot start queries, etc., as soon as the offer is accepted? I'm credit checked. is there anything else I can do to speed the process? I've been looking for 2 years. I will be in a hurry.
Wow, 2 years is quite a long time to be looking for a house. The short answer is no. And I tell you what, I get really frustrated with solicitors who say, you send so the seller solicitor sends out the contract pack, and you hope that the buyer solicitors are going to come back and ask all sorts of questions about what you've sent them. And then you ring them and they say, "Oh, I'm going to wait for my search results to come in." And you think, well, why are you waiting for that? Why are you waiting for the results to come in? That could be 3 or 4 weeks before you do any work. It doesn't make any sense to me. So the short answer is absolutely not. They can start the queries as soon as your offer accepted. Well, as soon as they receive the pack of information from the seller solicitors. The only thing you do need to get in sorted is your ID. We do that online, very quick, 5 minutes. But crucially, you've got to give your solicitor evidence of 2 things: where your money is, where your deposit is, i.e. the source of funds, but also how you've acquired that wealth, if you like. So source of wealth. So solicitors are looking, let's see the money in the account, but I want to know how you've got that money. And is it evidence of that, you've got a problem.
And is it acceptable, just for fun, is it acceptable for someone to say, I had a great day at the races?
Absolutely.
As long as they can prove that's what happened.
Yeah, if you got the betting slip.
Right, okay.
Yeah, I mean, it's not a problem. Solicitors won't accept cash. So you take the suitcase of cash in and say, here it is from the 3:30 at Haydock. There's 15 grand I won, if only. Then the solicitor's going to say, that's very interesting. Thank you very much. Pay it into an account. And then perhaps you can transfer the money to us. But as long as you've got as long as you've got the evidence of funding, and I have had some lottery winners. I did have a guy that rang me and said, I've won the lottery, the Canadian lottery, and I'm looking for a house, and I'm buying a house at £1 million. And I said, that's great. Have you got evidence? And he said, well, I've got this email confirming I've won the money. And I said, well, did you actually enter the lottery? And he said, well, I'm not sure if I did actually. So that was a spoof one, but I have actually had someone that won the lottery and successfully purchased a property.
Wow, okay. So if there was someone who just had a suitcase of cash for 20 years and decided to use it to buy property, that wouldn't, I mean, what would happen? Would the solicitor say, you can't buy this property, that cash is not acceptable? I mean, in other words, what's the need that needs to be satisfied?
Yeah, it's a tricky one, that one, because when you've sort of been saving a little bit of money every year, and it might be cash, and then you pay it into a bank, how does a solicitor know that's not tainted money, it's not criminal money? And sometimes we will look at the profile of a client. So if it's a young person and they say, I've saved for a number of years and they've got £100,000 in the account, you might start asking some questions. Whereas if it's someone, old like you or me, then they might be thinking, we might be looking at it going, well, it's perfectly reasonable that they've saved that sort of money. They might have a passbook showing some historic payments. There's no sort of hard and fast rule. It's about looking at risk, looking at, is it credible that they've got this money over a period of time? But we do get some weird and wonderful ones. We've had recently we had a sale of a couple of Rolexes, sale of a classic car. We've had crypto is one which perhaps we can talk about as well, because that might be something that people look at. So that's an interesting one as well.
That is interesting, actually, and we'll come back to crypto, because if I'm right, your firm, you are able to actually help people who have made money through crypto, right?
Yep, we are.
That's interesting. Okay, cool. Well, fascinating. And so effectively, what you're saying is that as a buyer, you instruct your solicitor, and if you can't satisfy your solicitor can say, no, you can't do this.
If your solicitor's not satisfied as to source of funds and how you've also source of wealth and how you've acquired those funds, they will probably turn around to you and say, I'm sorry, you haven't satisfied our due diligence checks. We can't act.
Okay.
In the background, what that solicitor may do is they may report you to the National Crime Agency.
Okay.
Because they may be thinking that this is criminal money, and there's an obligation on us as solicitors to try and weed out criminal money, because we don't want it washed through our accounts. So we might be we can't tell you, because that would be tipping you off, but we could be making a secret report to the NCA online.
That's really interesting. So actually, you say there are obligations on you. So if you were to miss one, if one slipped through the net, so if dodgy money slipped through the net,
Yeah.
would your firm ultimately potentially be liable for that, for not
Yeah,
catching?
the individual. So if any of my team have a problem and they're not sure, then they would come to our money laundering reporting officer, and it's up to him to decide whether or not we make a report to the National Crime Agency. So as long as that solicitor has reported up the line, they're exempt from any criminal prosecution. But there have been cases where solicitors have failed to do any due diligence, let the money wash through their account, and they'll stick them in clink.
Right. Wow. Have you? And
Serious, it's serious stuff. You know,
yeah.
money laundering is rife, and we can't allow it to happen. And solicitors are easy targets, I'm afraid.
Right. Yeah. Of course. Yeah. And you're at risk as well. I just wanted, although I meant to say at the beginning, for those of you who didn't watch last time, Simon actually also has a background first as an estate agent and then as a mortgage broker as well. Is that right?
Financial
So,
advisor, yeah.
so you have been in all of the shoes of the people in all of the parties of the transactions.
For my
So,
sins, yes.
yeah. Okay. We've got a couple of interesting questions coming in here. Let's start with the first one. Hi, so this is from Lil Gomez on YouTube. Sorry, I'm going to move my camera though I can't see it. I'm in the process of buying, but noticed on the searches that Land Registry has the vendor's name and then Barclays Bank as a charter. I think it means a charge, doesn't it? What does it mean? Should I raise it with my conveyancer?
No, it's part of the due diligence that your conveyancer will carry out. So every property, or most properties, have a register, electronic deeds, basically just showing who the owner is, the address. Usually there's a plan as well showing you. There's always a plan showing the extent of the property. Each has a number, and then if there's a charge, which is what you're referring to, or a mortgage, then that will be shown on there as well. And as part of the process, what your solicitor will make sure is that when you become when you become the owner, that mortgage will be paid off and will disappear from the register. And if you're buying with a mortgage, then your new mortgage will appear on there as well as you as the new owner.
Great. Okay, cool. Thank you. So that question is not a conveyancing question. Actually, no, it's not a bad question. It's just not a convincing one. Okay. David Miller on YouTube asks, would you exchange contracts with a 10% deposit if the builder can't give you a completion date? Good question.
Yeah, that is a good question. It's a funny one with builds because it's a bit of a weird one, because usually what happens is that when you're actually bound into a deal, you exchange contracts, and that's when it's binding on all parties. And at that stage, your solicitor will be writing a completion date. That's the date you actually move into the contract. Now, if you're buying a new build, sometimes the property's not even out the ground, but the builder's solicitor says you've still got to exchange contracts within 4 weeks of us sending you the papers. So you could exchange contracts, and then you won't have an actual date for moving. Now, builders have to sign up to a sort of consumer-friendly contract, and in there will be a sort of estimated completion date. So when you exchange contracts, there'll be an estimated completion date. And if the builders fail to build the property and get it ready for you, if they don't do it within that time scale, then you have the right to withdraw from the contract without penalty, and you get your deposit back.
Okay.
One thing you have got to think about when you're buying a new build, if it's not going to be built for 6 months, you've got to think about your mortgage, because if you get a mortgage offer, that may expire, that rate may expire before the property's built, and then you'll have to reapply. Things may have changed, your circumstances may have changed, you may not be able to get a mortgage, or it'll be on a different rate. So that's always a risk when you buy a plot or it's not out of the ground.
Cool. Now, I'd just like to quickly do a plug for our little partnership here. Those of you who are watching and who, I always say, first and foremost, if you've got an estate agent that you trust, like really trust, and they have a conveyancer that they work with regularly because the conveyancer is great quality, then go with who the agent you trusts suggest. That's always my first advice. If you haven't got that, then if you know someone else that you trust, or if someone in your family's using, you trust them, go with them. If you are someone though that just doesn't have anyone that you trust to ask, and you don't want to go trawling around online websites, I've got it covered with these guys at Thomas Legal, who are my conveyancing partners. And if you'd like to get them lined up, whether you're buying or selling, by the way, especially in this market, never more important than to have your conveyancers lined up when you make your offer, so ready to go, so that when you make your offer as a buyer, you can say, I've already got my constructors, my conveyancers lined up, and I'm ready to go. And if you're a seller, being contract ready in this marketplace is very, very advisable. That means having everything like ready to go, so that you're really attractive to the buyers who can be super picky about what they're going to buy.
Yeah, do it as you put the property on the market.
Yeah, exactly.
You will save weeks and weeks.
Yeah, and by saving weeks off your transaction time, you massively reduce the chance of it falling through and failing. Which actually brings me on to I've got a question I wanted to ask you. In the chains that there at the moment, where all of the parties want to proceed, so I'm not talking about chains which fail because someone pulls out because they've changed their mind. That happens and there's nothing we can do about it. But there are chains failing where all the parties want to proceed, but something's changed and it means it can't go ahead. What's the number one cause of those unintended chain failures that you see at the moment? I mean, is it, for example, you mentioned about a buyer's mortgage offer expiring?
Yeah, that's rare. It's usual because, as I said, usually these people are serious. It's usually, I mean, it's all sorts of things. It can be survey. Sometimes people do change their mind. There's a better property come on the market. So it's a bit more keenly priced. Downvaluing a little bit of that. I mean, I had a client the other day and the lender just said, we are not going to offer a mortgage because the service charge is too high. And that was a new build, shared ownership. But in a sort of mixed block. So some of the blocks were 100% owned. Some of them were designated shared ownership, but had things like concierge. And the lender just said, we're not going to lend. So, no fault of the client, thought it was a good shared ownership. Another one which was sort of timber framed, and lender said not going to lend. So the client went back and said to the seller, well, the only way I can proceed is to drop my price by a couple $100,000, and in fact it was accepted.
Wow,
very rare. But
some
if
sellers
the property's unmortgageable, then
that's the point.
Yeah.
Property's unmortgageable and the seller needs to move.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, the first flat I ever bought I bought it off a landlord, but he clearly I went in 35% below asking in Brighton, and he accepted it. And it was just because that's all I had. I couldn't pay anymore. That was the maximum amount I had. It was a cash buyer.
Wasn't that Richard Branson who did that? I think he did that on his Necker Island. I think it was on at 4 million, and he offered 80 grand. And he left it on the table. And then the following year, the agent came back to him and said, well, it might take 120 because we haven't had any other offers. So he paid 120,000 for Necker. So there you go.
These do happen. These do happen.
I'm not sure about the islands, though, anymore.
Yeah, I mean, I've got a story in my own family, actually. My grandparents' generation in my family, of an amazing house that got bought, and they offered half the asking price and were sent out like horrified and offended sellers and everything else. And 6 months later, they rang up and said, "Is that offer still there?"
Yeah.
And actually, this is the market when actually that's more likely to happen now.
Yeah, it's finding those motivated sellers.
Yeah. They are there, which is why it's worth being out viewing, because you don't know which the motivated sellers are, and the more you view, the better your chances. And the point about that is that I know there are a lot of buyers at the moment who want to move in now and they want to buy now, but they are very rightly worried about overpaying. But you don't need to wait if you find one of those motivated sellers and you're the offer.
And ask the agent some pertinent questions. I think you could ask them, hey, how long it's been on the market?
Yeah.
What is the vendor's position? And have there been any other deals on the table with it? And if there have, why have they fallen through? Because the agent is bound to tell you why that is the case. And if it's survey, and then that's going to give you a good insight as to what's been going on.
Yeah. Here's a question. Nikki Nike, can I give the money straight to the house seller?
Well, that'd be a little bit crazy if you do that, because they'll probably run off with it and never see it again. No, is the simple answer. It goes through solicitors, because a solicitor, your own solicitor, must make sure that money is protected and is kept by the seller's solicitor until such time as all the money is available, and then and the correct documentation is available, and then that's passed over and the money is passed the other way. It's absolutely essential that you don't give any money directly to the house seller. It does happen, and then it all goes horribly wrong. Right. So do not ever do that.
Okay. Abe Gim on YouTube says, The seller has no building report or any other documentation for internal wall alterations. They say that a surveyor can confirm the structural soundness. Is that right?
That's a good question. So there's differences here because loads of people try and, knock through walls, and we're all, we all want open plan these days, don't we? That's the cool way to be. And now if you're knocking down a wall and it's non-structural, then you don't need to worry about it. You don't need consent of any sort. However, if you're knocking down a structural wall, you need something called building regulation approval. And that means that you do it to a certain set of regulations that the local authority inspect it. And then if you've done it correctly, they give you what's called a completion certificate. So whenever you buy a property and there's been structural alterations, you want to make sure the seller has these certificates. They've been issued since about 1994. So most extensions and alterations should have that. If it's old work, I really wouldn't worry too much. But you may, yes, it's if you don't have consent, the council, in general terms, can't take action if it's actually only over 12 months old. So they're after 12 months old, they're not really too interested. There are exceptions. So, but for your own benefit, yes, you get a structural engineer who could go around and check to see that the work has been carried out properly. And there should be sort of structural calculations and that sort of thing. If a beam's being put up, I'm not a surveyor, but this is just general. So structural, you should get building regulation approval and a completion certificate. Non-structural, you don't need to worry.
Cool. Thank you.
And always have a survey before you buy. Don't rely on the survey carried out for the mortgage lender. It's not a survey.
I can vouch for that personally.
Please get a survey.
Never ever buy a property, especially new ones, as you say. A lot of people just think, oh, it's brand new, I'm going to worry about it.
No, definitely brand new.
Never, and this especially goes for cash buyers, but never. It's equally for everyone. Never buy a property without a full survey. You just, it's you. Even if the survey comes back and says, tickety boo, everything's great, fantastic. You haven't got any problems to worry about, and you purchased that peace of mind. But the number of times the people who think they know property as well, and the full survey comes back, you just want to know you're not buying. I've actually had some followers message me saying, I've just bought a house, the seller didn't tell me about this, and I've just discovered that there's subsidence. What do I do?
Yeah,
get it fixed. Sorry, you get
the client whose dad goes round and who's the builder. That's always a good one. Dad'll do it.
I mean, it's worth you pointing out. I'll ask you the question: as a buyer, is the seller responsible for the condition of the property that I'm buying once I bought it, or not? In other words, people are sort of asking, they're expecting that if they've paid for it, then there should be some sort of guarantee, even when it's a private sale on a used property. But it's not, is it? It's buyer beware. It's caveat emptor.
Yeah, right? New build, you might get a 10-year guarantee, structural warranty. That's great. But generally, no. The only difference, I suppose, the only position could be is if the seller knew about defects and didn't advise you as a buyer, and they had been, for example, if there'd been structural problems with the property and they had reported them to the insurance company and hadn't told you, then you may well have a claim for misrepresentation.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
Guys, get a survey. Get a survey. Yeah. It's not money you want to spend. It's not money you enjoy spending, but it's been money. It will be money that you're glad you spent.
Yeah.
Steve Stone, I assume bank statements are adequate evidence of funding. I think
they are adequate for evidence of where the money is, but they're not adequate evidence of how you've acquired that wealth.
Yeah. What do they call it? An IBAN from Central America isn't going to get you ticked off, is it? Like, that's
those solicitors may, do it. We had one last week where the solicitor had done all the work, and then the week before the client was due to move, they then started looking at the funding. Now that is completely against all the regs, and then they got very uncomfortable with it, and then we had to pick up the file because the solicitor said we can't act any longer.
Wow.
So, yeah, it does happen.
This is an unusual question. Not sure if it's something you can answer, actually. If I have security clearance, will that help make it faster for checking on my cash money? Says Son of Odin.
Wow. I don't quite know what security clearance means. But if you work, I mean, in Cheltenham we have GCHQ, one of the huge employer in Cheltenham. If you're a spy in GCHQ, it doesn't make any odds to me.
Right.
You might be a brilliant money launderer because you know how to do it. Absolutely not.
Yeah.
No. No, I'm going to treat you
No.
with the
In fact, if
same.
you've got security clearance, you're probably going to get checked twice as hard.
Yeah, exactly. Right. And if you're a solicitor, you got no hope. So
Oh, he works for the government, it'll be fine.
yeah, exactly. Yeah.
But interesting question.
That's a good question.
Okay, now this is a topic that comes up a lot. It's worth going through, I think. How common is it for solicitors to pay estate agents for referrals?
Yeah, that's a good question. And we pay estate agents for referrals. We have a great relationship with some estate agents, and if they give us volume, I don't have a problem in paying them a fee for those introductions, because we wouldn't get that work otherwise. We don't charge any more or less for client to client, so there's no difference as far as the client is concerned. So it is quite common. We have lots of estate agency business coming to us where we don't pay referral fees, and agents don't want a fee. So I think amongst the conveyancing world, it is quite common.
Yeah, I think so too. But I think that where there's a real problem, and this is my own personal opinion, is when you are using an agent who's part of the conditions of using that agent are you're forced to use their conveyancer.
That's anti-competitive, and that shouldn't
It
ever
happens.
be happening. I know it does.
It happens. And so you're forced to. There's a very big purple example of this, but the referral fee in those instances, some of them that I know of are up to 50% of the conveyancing fee.
Absolutely right, and that's outrageous.
To me, that's outrageous. That is just. I mean, it's borderline fraud. It isn't actual fraud. Otherwise, they wouldn't do it. They wouldn't get away with it. But it's so close. I mean, it's certainly ethically, definitely, in my view, wrong. And a lot of people who I don't care naming them. A lot of people who sign up to Purple Bricks are unaware that you are then obliged to use their conveyancers. Simon, hey, tell me, what do you think of Purple Bricks' conveyancing firm?
Pass. But yes, Purple Bricks saying, and they say if you don't use our conveyancer, we're going to charge you another £300 or something. Yeah. That is totally outrageous. It's anti-competitive. I'd be reporting that to trading standards if it was me, because you cannot. That is just it is outrageous. And funnily enough, Purple Bricks aren't doing very well at the moment. But yeah, I
think that where referral fees are that much, so like you're talking 40-50% of the legal fee, it warps and distorts everything in terms of conflicts of interest. Because if an estate agent is going to make significant commission off you, even if your transaction fails, Purple Bricks gets its fee whether you sell or not, they're less concerned about the quality of conveyancer. So let's leave aside Purple Bricks, right? There are other normal conventional estate agents, big ones, who have a conveyancing referral system where the referral fees are disproportionately large, and it's the kickback, and it's a major part of the estate agent's income. And that, for me, is where you have the real problem, because you've got estate agents who are, so you've got an individual lister, like a branch manager, who is paid commission for winning an instruction, because they're going to get referral commissions off that instruction, even if they don't sell it. And in my mind, if I mean, no one's going to bring this case, but there is a very strong case to be argued that is counter the interests of your client, and simply shouldn't be allowed anymore. And of course, there's a lot of talk about referral fees being banned, isn't there? There has been, and I think that would be perhaps a step too far, because I do think it's okay if, for example, someone pays 10% of their turnover as advertising to get business, then it's nothing wrong to pay 10% of your fee to someone that introduces you business. It's no different from advertising, really. It's just it's a marketing. It's a form of marketing. But you know, and of course, no one objects to how much you spend on your advertising costs today. But it's not really that different. The problem comes when it gets too big, and you're being referred not because of the quality of your operation, but simply because of the upside. And it's the same on mortgage referrals, isn't it, with agents doing that? Yeah.
I think, I think and also solicitors are idiots for doing it, because in effect, if you're giving 50% of your fee away immediately, which you are, you're actually probably not making any profit. Or if you, the only way you can make profit is you dumb it down and you get someone that's not qualified.
Yeah.
We've got a local firm to us, and if you look on the website, it's just full of administration assistants.
And
Now,
you see,
if you want to chance it and do that, then that's up to you. But I would personally want to make sure I've got proper lawyers dealing with my purchase.
I keep on hearing stories of chains breaking down because someone up or down the chain had a conveyancer that dropped the ball or something did, and so it's extremely frustrating, especially for the estate agents whose fee is dependent upon the transaction happening. When the transaction fails because the chain breaks because someone was using a crap conveyancer further up or down the chain. It's not in anyone's interest. It's just it's a really it's just, I don't know what the word is, but it's utter short-termism. And it's sort of, but I just also for the sake of openness, by the way, everyone that does come through me to use Simon's conveyancing firm, I get a kickback from Simon. Not 50%, I hasten to add.
No, he gets 80.
I wish. Anyway, so on to the next question. I'm not sure about this. Rum Shop HQ says, purchase the property pack, so the search pack from AMHWC. Cool, thank you very much for doing that. Offer accepted in May. Online conveyancer of the seller sat on paperwork for 4 weeks. Price we believe has dropped 20k. Is this Laundering? Okay, so you mean the buyer? No, you're the buyer.
They're the buyer. I don't know where this 20,000. I mean, it's Laundering. If anyone doesn't know what Laundering, it means you basically drop your offer aggressively, usually just before you commit to exchange your contracts.
I think they're asking. They believe that the price of the property has now dropped £20,000. Would it be Laundering to go back to their seller and say, we now want to pay £20,000 less? So yes, that would be Laundering, but you're entitled to do it. It's not illegal.
No, it's not. But bear in mind, if you're buying with a mortgage and you just about to exchange contracts and you say to the seller, I'm going to pay you £20,000 less than I agreed to, you're going to have to go all the way back to the beginning with your mortgage offer. You're going to have to go report, your solicitor's got to report that to the lender, and the lender may turn around and say, we're not comfortable with this, we're going to withdraw the offer, or, right, we've got to issue another offer, and that might take another few weeks.
Yeah. I always say to people who are thinking about renegotiating, only renegotiate if you would be walking away anyway if they didn't lower the price. And if you wouldn't walk away unless they lower the price, then don't risk renegotiating if you want the place.
And I think survey is, coming back to your point about survey, if you get a proper survey and the survey says it's not as you expected, then you're quite within your rights to come back and say, it's not as I expected. I want to review the price.
I've got some other interesting comments that have come in here, actually. There's an opinion question. Missed the first 20 minutes, but wanted to know if many of your clients, Simon, think that bank survey is actually a survey.
Yeah, well, that's the point I made. It's not a survey. Sometimes banks don't even send their surveyors around. If you're not borrowing very much, they'll actually just do a desktop survey. So they'll just look on a computer, say, 11 Acacia Avenue. Yes, it exists. We can see Google Maps. We can look at Google Earth. And we're comfortable it exists and tick the box. So they are just checking that it provides adequate security for that loan. It is not a survey. So that's another reason that you should get your own survey carried out. We make it very clear to clients up front that they should be getting their own survey, and precisely for that reason.
All right, here's quite a techie. If this is too much of a rabbit hole, let me know. We'll dodge it. But Mayday says, do we still, sorry, he typed wrong, it's confused me. Do we still need to adhere to old covenants on title deeds? Can covenants be removed? One covenant says no structures can be built on the land.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's a big subject. Covenants are basically things you can't do. They're restrictions which affect your enjoyment. So there might be a covenant which says, yes, you can't extend the property without the consent of the neighbour next door. Okay, it's simple. Now, these covenants have been around for years and years, hundreds of years sometimes. So do you still need to adhere to them? Well, yes, legally you do, but they might be outdated covenants. Sometimes they've already been breached. Sometimes the seller's done work which they shouldn't have, and there's a covenant on the land. Now, in that case, you can get a cheap legal insurance policy, which the legal insurance policy might cost you a couple £100. If anyone comes and knocks on the door and says, you've breached those covenants, I've got the benefit of those covenants, you can waive the policy at them or speak to the insurance company and say, I need you to fight this claim for me. So legal insurance policy is very, very easy. Can the covenants be removed? Yes, they can. If you can find out who benefits from the covenant, not who you're affected, but who can enforce it against you. So they can be removed. Difficult, can be complicated, can be expensive from a legal point of view.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. So they can be removed. Okay. Couple of funny comments here. Luke M says buyers are guilty until proven innocent with money laundering regs.
Absolutely right. Perfect.
If bank statements are not proof of your deposit, what do you need to supply? SA 302.
Well, SA 302 will show how much tax you paid.
Okay.
But it doesn't show necessarily source of wealth. You've got to tie both in together. So if someone says, I've got an inheritance, what would I be looking for? I'll be looking for, right, let's see, I want to see the money coming to your account from this inheritance. Mm-hmm. And then I want you to provide me with a letter that you probably have had from the solicitor who acted, showing that you're entitled to that inheritance, shows the amount, and that matches up with the amount that's coming to your account. So don't get confused about statements. Great evidence of there's the money, but doesn't tell me how you've acquired that money.
Son of Odin again quickly. Do you need a conveyancer as a cash buyer before making an offer on the house? May I actually can I ask this one because I know the answer, but
yeah.
Although you don't need a conveyancer to make an offer, so that's the straightforward answer to that question is no, you don't need a conveyancer as a cash buyer before you make an offer. If you are making an offer and there are other people offering as well, and you've already got a conveyancer and they don't, you're going to get your offer accepted if it's the same as the others, because you are at least a couple of weeks ahead of the other buyers. You're showing that you're more serious about it. What you should also do is offer to pay for the search pack on the day the offer is accepted, because that again will speed things up. Okay, I'm going to take this comment because this is the first ever question we've had from Twitch. I've been live streaming on Twitch the whole time and I've been just tumbleweed, but we've got someone on Twitch. I feel I should speak up here. The 10-year new homes built NHBC warranty. What does NHBC stand for? Do you know?
National House Building Council.
Okay, warranty is a very weak product, more for lenders box ticking than it is useful in the event of an issue. Perhaps do live stream covering it. I just wondered if you had an opinion on that opinion.
I do, and I don't think it is a weak product. There's some worse ones out there. Okay. It was one of the first 10-year structural guarantees that came out. I can tell you I had a client once who purchased a property. It had been signed off by the council as being a great flat. It was a £400,000 flat, and purchased the property. About 6 months later, horrendous problems with damp. NHBC stepped in. They bought the whole block, moved the client. So bought the flat off the client. It was so horrific. Put it all right.
Wow.
It's a proper guarantee. I would dispute that one, I'm afraid.
Okay.
Good. Yeah.
This is a good question for everybody. This is George B123 Music on YouTube. How are exchange and completion dates agreed when there are multiple people in the chain?
I see. This is a great question, isn't it? Every solicitor's nightmare. So basically what happens is when you've got, let's see here, you've got 5 people in the chain. You would hope that there's been a conversation between solicitors or between estate agents that before you get to exchange contracts, there is an agreed date. It's got to be during the week, not at weekends. So let's say that conversation taken place. The first solicitor at the bottom, so the first time buyer solicitor, will ring the next solicitor up and say, right, we're ready to do the deal. The solicitor then, that next solicitor will say, well, I can't do the deal with you because I've got a purchase, but release the contract to me. I'll then come back to you by a certain time, and then I can go ahead and do my exchange on the next one. That's all good. They agree the time that the contract is what we call released. Then they go to the next. So that solicitor then goes to the next solicitor. And it goes on and on and on until all the solicitors spoken, and it comes all the way back down the chain. Now, that's great. But if you've got 10 solicitors, chances are 4 of them will be playing golf. 1 will be on holiday. Seriously, it's hard to get 10 solicitors that are available during a day to get a deal through. We don't see many big chains these days, so it's not so much of a problem. But the exchange is something which is released up the chain between solicitors and then comes all the way back down.
This is my own question, do you ever get a scenario where all the solicitors in a chain try and have a conference call?
No, they're not that clever.
Wouldn't that save a lot of time?
Well, you would hope so, wouldn't you? I did have a member of staff once at my old firm who managed to exchange contracts on the client's sale, but forgot to exchange contracts on the client's purchase. Having not thought about it, the following day came in and realised her error, rang the seller's solicitor and said, just ringing to exchange contracts. And they said, client can't move on that date now. They want to move on another date.
Oh.
So solicitors, as solicitors, we had to pick up the cost of moving the clients out, paying for their removals, putting them in a hotel. So that was a very painful.
All because of a missed phone call.
This phone call forgot all about the onward purchase.
Alexandra Saywell says structural surveys are too expensive. Not compared to what happens if you don't get one and there's a problem. They're not. Well, they are expensive.
Yes, it's a difference between structural surveys and home buyers reports.
Yes.
So the home buyers report is a sort of halfway house, and you need to speak to your surveyor about it. Structural surveys tend to be for much older properties because they have more issues. But again, be advised on that by your surveyor.
Yeah. I know
when you say, are they really too expensive? If you're buying a £400,000 house and it's 1,500 quid, is that really too expensive? I'm not sure about that.
I know somebody who wanted to buy their old house off their landlord. They'd lived there for a long time. They knew it inside out. They'd actually been doing some maintenance themselves, and finally agreed a price to buy it from the landlord, and thought, you know what, we'll get the survey done anyway. And the survey came back saying that it needed the equivalent of 50% of the purchase price spending on it just to stop the deterioration, not to actually improve it. And that was for someone who lived in it and thought they knew it inside out. And the structural survey was, it's structural surveys, when relevant and appropriate, are money well spent, I would say. Oh, here's a good one. Arwen the Bard, Evening Arwen on YouTube, says, would you advise buyers to wait until a seller's probate is finalised, or can they buy their search packs and instruct solicitors before probate comes back?
Well, it's worth saying what probate is. Yes. So if you die with a will, what happens is the will has to get proved, sort of signed off, if you like, and then it has to go to this. Once you pay the inheritance tax as well, you have to then send the will to a government department called the probate registry, and they then stamp it and say, yes, this is all genuine, and they give you a little document which says grant of probate, and that then allows the executors under the will to sell the property, or basically to divvy up the estate, whatever's in the estate. But usually, in our case, we're talking about a property. The problem is, like all other government departments, under-resourced, probate can take a long time. So you might go and see a property agent says, probate has been, we're just waiting for probate. You don't know how complicated that estate is. You could be waiting for months and months and months. It's a difficult one. I think you'd be looking for your solicitor to speak to the seller's solicitor and say, how close is probate? Can probate be expedited so that we can get this deal done? But probate can take a long, long time to sort out. So, and until it's sorted, the executors, no one's got power to sell that property. They can't exchange contracts with you. They can't do anything. So it's a really good question, that, and I think it does depend on the probate and how complicated the estate is. But
wow, and so
it might be an amazing house, and you might think, well, at least let's get it under offer. But strictly speaking, then no one can accept your offer because they don't have the power to accept your offer because they don't have the probate. So, but often they do.
Yeah, okay. We've got so many good questions here. I don't think I've tried to do all of them, so I'm just trying to
do another one.
I'm just trying to pick the best ones for. Right. Okay. Sorry, I've got to give you a question if I can't see it reading in silence. Well, everyone's we've got 342 people waiting while I read them quietly. Okay, so let me pick one. That's a mortgage question, I think. Maybe not. Okay. Suave on YouTube says, my former mortgage broker said you can add your stamp duty to how much you borrow. Is this the case? That's a mortgage question, isn't it?
Yeah, well, whatever. If you add
the answer.
If you add your stamp duty on, you've got to disclose that to the mortgage lender, and the mortgage lender will say, well, you're deliberately inflating the amount you want to borrow to pay, and I don't think they'll agree it.
Yeah, okay.
But, yeah.
This is an interesting one. If I bought a house with a mentally ill neighbour who has caused problems before I bought it, and the seller didn't tell me in the selling forms, what can I do 2 years after?
Yeah, that's a really good question, and it's a tricky one. There's a question in the seller's property information form that the sellers fill out. I think says something like, have there been any disputes about the property with any neighbours? Now, it all comes down to what is the problem? Was it just a problem between the two of them in that they didn't like each other, or that the person is mentally ill? And actually, what is mentally ill? Or is it a problem which affects the property? Did you have a dispute with them because they were arguing about the fence, or it was a noise issue, or something like that, and they have misrepresented the position to you? We did. I heard of a client. I can't remember if it was us that acted or not. I'm not sure, but this poor girl moved into a flat, and it turned out that was a very aggressive neighbour next to her. Now that was a real problem, and you look at the paperwork and you think, well, is that a dispute? Not necessarily. Just because he's aggressive, it's not a property issue. It's more of a sort of, it could be a civil issue between you as people. But it's the crucial point is, does it affect the property? Now, in practical terms, well, of course it affects you. You've got a mentally ill neighbour who's actually causing you problems, but it's a difficult one. I think you'd have to take some quite specific advice on that.
Right. Okay.
Whether it relates to the property or not.
Okay. I'm keen to get through as many as I can. Here's one. I've had this question quite a few times in my comments and private messages. Patrick on YouTube says, first time buyer, offer accepted in February. Okay, so that's 5 months ago.
Yeah.
Solicitor referred to by the agent has been very slow and poor. Mortgage offer due to expire in 1 week. Will we still have to pay solicitor fees if the sale falls through?
Yeah, well, I mean, I do sympathise with you. There may be reasons, then there may be problems outside the solicitor's control. We don't know enough about it. I think if you're unhappy, what you should do is you should complain in the first instance to the solicitor, and they are duty bound to send you a copy of their complaints procedure and who will deal with your complaint. So if they do try and charge you, this is once, and you put your complaint in writing to them, explaining your reasons why you don't think you should be paying them. If they respond and you're happy with the response, that's fine. If you're not happy, then you can go to the legal ombudsman.
Right. So what you're saying is, if it's the case that actually that there are genuine, legitimate reasons why the conveyancers couldn't move any faster, then they're not going to offer a refund. But if actually it turns out that they were asleep at the wheel, and as a result of that, this buyer might lose the deal, then yeah, they might have. Yeah. So, okay, cool. Thank you. Good answer. Next one. This is not just a minute on this, if you could. Could you expand on using crypto for payment, please? Any problems or special requirements? Nikki Knight on YouTube.
Yeah, good question. Crypto is a tricky one. We're not crypto experts. So what happens is that we will look at the source of funds. So what we will look at is we'll look at when you made the investment into crypto. So we'll be looking for the source of the money to go make the original crypto investment. We then outsource that request to our crypto experts, who are actually accountants with a crypto specialist in them, and they will then give us a tick in the box. However, that sadly there aren't that many accountants out there that have this sort of skill, or many people that can sign off crypto. So they are very busy, and it is likely, if you're purchasing with crypto, A, your mortgage lender may not be happy with it, B, your solicitor may not be happy with it, and C, even if you instructed someone like us, it could take months before the due diligence is completed on the crypto element.
Right. As a little aside for everyone's entertainment, I invested £200 in crypto in 2017. It's now worth somewhere around 50 grand, and I can't find it.
It was that guy in Wales, wasn't it? Who didn't he say pay the council to dig up the tip or something because he's got a...
I remember writing. I wrote the codes down. I wrote them down. In fact, right now behind me on the floor, I've got a whole scatter of notebooks where I've been looking to try and find. I can't find it.
You've had a senior moment.
Anyway, I mean, it was so early on in it. I wasn't even that familiar with what they were or how important those codes were.
I invested 50 quid and I think it's still worth £25.
You were late to the party. Okay, here's a good one. AWO7 on YouTube says, should a conveyancer be able to tell you things like whether you can put a fence on the front boundaries of a property you are purchasing?
Yeah, certainly with newer houses, there are often restrictions about boundaries at the front. And so if there are, and we come back to covenants again. So covenant could be not to put anything at the front of the property because they want to keep it nice and open plan. So yes, that is something that should be dealt with.
Thank you. And here's a good one from Tom1991 Ash on YouTube. If you buy at an auction house, we buy a house from auction, how does the process work? Do you still need a conveyancer?
Yeah, so the two sorts of auctions. One is the traditional sort of auction, and the other one is the modern method. And the modern method is becoming quite common. The traditional auction is you go along, usually to a pub, auctioneer stands up, talks to you about 10 Acacia Avenue, asks for bids, and you put your hand up. And if you're the winning bidder, then you exchange contracts there, and then you write a check for 10% of the purchase price for the deposit, or the next day you transfer it into the account, and you usually have 28 days to actually complete the purchase. The risk there is the hammer's down, you've exchanged contracts, you cannot withdraw. In that instance, you want to make sure that you have instructed a solicitor as early as you can to look at the pack. And what should happen before the auction happens is that there's a pack available, a legal pack. You make sure you get a conveyancer to look at it. If you need a mortgage, you must have your mortgage in place before you go along to the auction and put your hand up. That's a traditional way of doing the auction. Not so many of those anymore, usually reserved for nice little cottages which are dilapidated in the Cotswolds.
Right.
The modern method of auction is an online version, but it's different. The modern method, if you bid online, if you're successful, you sometimes pay 5% of the purchase price as a reservation fee. You then have 28 days to exchange contracts, and then usually another 28 days or 2 weeks after that to complete the deal. Again, you need a conveyancer. If you don't exchange contracts within the 28 days, you will lose your reservation fee, your 5% that you put down.
Wow. Okay.
So it's not really binding, the modern method of auction. It's more like you're entering into what we would call an exclusivity period, a time when you can go at it. No one else can do anything with the property. You've got 28 days to get to exchange your contracts.
Okay. Still a few more questions. We're starting to run out of time now, but a couple of them are a bit too property specific. Yeah, is there any, from your point of view, any specific advice on buying a repossessed property, or is it no different?
It is different in that you buying a repossession property. In other words, this is where someone sadly has been repossessed by the building society. The building society, in fact, just taken it back and said, "You're not paying the mortgage. We're having it back," and they've got the power to do that when you take our mortgage out. The risk to you with buying a repossession property is that you won't get anything from the building society or the bank. All you're going to get is a contract. Here it is, buy it. Thank you very much. We're not going to give you any warranties. We're not going to give you any guarantees. We're not going to tell you if there's been fights with the neighbours. That's it. You buy it as seen. So that's the risk. The other risk is the estate agents are duty bound. When the offer is accepted, they must advertise that in the press or online and confirm the amount that's been accepted, and allow other people to make offers right up to the date of exchange of contracts. And that's because they still have a duty to the previous borrower to make sure that they get the most amount for the property.
Yeah, cool. Okay. I know this is a tongue-in-cheek comment, but it's actually something I'd love your comment on, because I know how much you value the quality of your service. AW07 says, do all conveyancers purposely employ rude people to answer the phones?
Yes, they do. Yes.
But why is that the case so often, do you think?
You know, it's a bit like going to the doctor's surgery, isn't it? Where you have the receptionist who's basically the gatekeeper and thinks he or she is a doctor themselves and is determined to find out as much as they can before they put you through to the doctor. Yeah, I mean, it's sad if that is the case. I don't know why it is. All my staff have direct lines. They all have direct email. You know, my receptionist is lovely. And if I ever heard that she'd been rude to a client, I would be all over it. It's not acceptable. I don't know why they like it.
No, it's not acceptable.
I apologise on behalf of the conveyancing industry.
I mean, when you are ringing around to choose a conveyancer, if that's the experience you get on answer the phone, I would just hang up.
Yeah, I would as well. Go somewhere else.
But I mean, there's this comment here, actually. Susie Logan's comment says, mine, I assume you mean your conveyancer, has just gone to hospital for an op, but luckily her colleague's able to pick up the file. Which reminds me, actually, Simon, one of the things I find most impressive about your firm is how you have 2 solicitors on every case, so that if one's sick or on holiday, it doesn't slow things down. That to me is a major operational point of superiority over your competitors, and why one of the reasons I was so happy to recommend you to my followers.
Yeah, absolutely. You can't have the solicitor go on holiday or having an operation or anything like that and file. They get a locum in. This person that just comes in, and it takes them 2 weeks to understand what's happening on the file. It's just unacceptable behaviour, and it shouldn't be happening. So yeah,
and it happens a lot, doesn't it?
It does, happens all the time. Conveyancing is a cottage industry, I'm afraid.
So this is a very typical situation, and I know it feels very unfair, but I just think it's worth, again, for a lot of people, this is relevant. So this is Anne Riley, who's a seller on YouTube. We had a buyer pull out. I had started to purchase a new build. When the buyer pulled out of our property, I was left with a cancellation fee from my solicitor, even though it wasn't my fault.
Yeah, I feel for you. I mean, I suppose like anything, the solicitor has done some work, and they have to have some recompense for that work. There will be deals out there where some solicitors will go no completion, no fee, a bit like the estate agents. There aren't so many of those available around now. Some do no fault, no fee. So even though it's not your fault, you wouldn't get charged. So you must check the terms and conditions when you ring up and get a quote, and see on what basis they will, they will do the work for you. But sadly, like anything, solicitors have to be paid, and even if they've done 4 hours worth of work, I think it's quite reasonable that they would expect some of the fee for that.
It's probably one of the reasons you stopped being an estate agent and started being a solicitor, right? This is a good one. Imi212 on YouTube says, offer accepted, inquiries sent, seller died. Her partner not on title deeds, so going through probate. It's been 4 months, no response from the partner. Have I lost the house?
Yeah, well, hopefully you haven't lost the house, but the problem is that, as I said earlier, the grant of probate has got to come through from the probate registry before anything can happen. And as I said, it's been delayed. I think what I'd be doing is I'd be putting pressure on via the estate agent, saying, can you get him to expedite the probate if possible, so that at least we can get on with the transaction. But it's a very sad one, that one, and occasionally, yes, we do get clients that die before completion happens.
It's funny, I made a major purchase of something, not a property, about 3 or 4 years ago, and I got such a great deal. I wanted to secure it. It was going to take a few months to make it happen. And I remember saying to the seller, can I give you a deposit? And he said, he was an Irishman. No, he said, I might die before you get it. And he said, don't worry, it's yours. And it was, but he said that he was uncomfortable with taking a deposit. He said, don't worry, it's yours. But his reason for not accepting deposit was, I might die.
Great.
This is a good one. How do you legally cover yourself if you're splitting a house purchase with someone else with different percentages of the purchase price?
That's a great question.
Well, I did this once. My third ever purchase, which was in London.
I thought you were going to say your third wife then.
No. Third ever purchase was in London, Chelsea Cloisters, and it was a studio flat. And I bought it with my partner at the time. And my conveyancer at the time said to me, have you guys discussed what you're going to do if one of you changes your mind or one of you wants to get out and the other one doesn't? And we hadn't. And he said, here is something that you should just both sign, which gives both of you equal rights to call that you should sell it. So if either one of you wants to sell it, that's it. It gets sold. There's no agreement is required. And I thought that was really wise of him. Is that the kind of thing you'd say?
Yep. So if you're putting 50-50, probably no reason that you should actually have any sort of separate agreement. But if you're putting in different percentages of the purchase price, you should definitely have a separate agreement. And it's usually called a declaration of trust deed. And it basically says, John put in X, Joe put in X. In the event of a sale, John gets his stake back, Joe gets her stake back, and the rest they split between them on whatever percentages they want to split. And if they can't agree, then basically the house is sold and they do that. So we get them to fill out a questionnaire as to what they think is fair between them, because they need to decide that. Because it may be that one's going to pay the mortgage and one's going to be responsible for bills, and what happens if one pays off a bit of the mortgage, and do they get benefit of that? So they sign a separate agreement. The solicitors, we would draw that up for you, and they usually charge around between £350 and £500, I think, something like that. but really, really sensible to do if you are putting in separate percentages. Very, very important to do, I think.
I've got 30 seconds to wrap this up. So
Okay.
thank you very, very much, everybody. Thank you, Simon. And again,
Pleasure.
if you don't have a conveyancer that you trust and you need one, whether you're buying or selling, and you'd like to use Simon's firm, I heartily recommend them, mhwc.co.uk/conveyancing. The link is in the description below. Otherwise, have a great night. Thank you all for some fantastic questions, and we'll do it again soon. Thanks again, Simon.
Thank you.